Tanya Gerard, your congruency coach. I am thrilled to be here today. This is a new format for conversations on congruency, and I will be inviting my favorite coaches and thinkers and thought leaders to share with you the ways that congruency takes shape in the world. Today's episode, aligning with the theme of courage during October, we will explore the relationship between resilience and courage. And for that, I have invited the I had invited Nashifa D. They're a body-based resilience coach who works from a trauma-informed lens. Hello, Nashifa. It's amazing to have
Hello, Tanya.
you.
How are you doing?
Yeah,
My
I
pleasure.
thank you. So I'll introduce you. I want to introduce your work so people know what you do, and then we can start talking about resilience and courage. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Perfect. So Nashifa, they also support queer and BIPOC communities by facilitating diversity trainings. Just a footnote in case you don't know what BIPOC means, it means Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Nasifa is trans, brown, and Muslim, and they're excited to be talking about the intersection of courage and resilience. I am excited to have you here. I have been really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. So Tanya had graciously invited me to talk about courage, which is her theme in Own Your Decisions, and how that intersects with resilience. As Tanya had mentioned, I'm a resiliency coach, and I approach resiliency from a body-based perspective. So that what that means is it can be small things that use your own neurobiology.
Oh,
Works. Am I back? Good. Yeah. Okay. So it uses your own neurobiology. There we go. I don't know what happened there. Technology. But it uses your own neurobiology to help you, um, what I what we'll call regulated. So that means for your prefrontal cortex to be online. And so resiliency is really about uh, staying on your board, even when you're stressed, even when you're overwhelmed. It's not that you can stay regulated 100% of the time. Nobody really can. But resiliency is about knowing how to manage the overwhelm. It's about knowing how to manage the stress, to come back to being grounded, um, so that you can, in effect, maintain the level of mindfulness that you need. Uh, so, and it can be simple things. Like I often use rolling a tennis ball. I really like tennis balls. I carry them around my backpack. Uh, but you can be rolling a tennis ball under your foot, and that really helps. Just come back to yourself. It's a sensory perception. You can roll a little rock around in your hand, um, to kind of to get that sensory input. How courage and resiliency intersect in terms of how I see it. So courage is there's a huge definition for courage, right, Tanya?
yeah.
And it could be a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I
To
think
me,
it looks differently. I'm sorry, I think it looks differently to every person because
yeah,
it depends on where that courage is coming from and where that courage is going to, right? So, what does it
exactly.
mean
And
to you?
so courage to me is standing up to do the thing that you need to do, which is very big. But that could be anything. It could be getting more rest in a society, a capitalist society that says you need to keep doing to the point of exhaustion. It can be about advocacy and standing up for yourself and your community, or advocacy for other marginalized folks. It can also be choosing to say no. This is not something I'm going to do today, which we had been talking about in your group as well, Tanya.
Yes.
And I think that's really important to be able to say no. I cannot do this today.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would just take a little bit, offer a little bit of context for that because, okay, my group, Own Your Decisions, is its purpose is to help you and to support you in your journey to find who you truly are and make the decisions that create well-being and make it sustainable on the long term. And every month we explore a theme, and this month we are exploring courage because, as Nashifa says, we need courage. We have seen beautiful displays of courage. We have witnessed all kinds of approach to courage, and I also feel that we, as part of our recovery, well, if you live in the United States, this is definitely relevant with the political climate, but even if you don't live here, it's part of recovering from a life-changing experience is to find the courage you had throughout the process, the courage you experienced, and learning from it so you can be sure that you can be courageous again, right? So just that context for what Nashifa is referring right now. So yes, we talk about the courage of doing, and we have also talked about the courage of not doing, or staying silent, or sit one down, or the courage to make the decision that will create well-being for you, whatever that means to you in that moment.
That's
So
exactly it. Yes.
resilience has more. What relationship do you see specifically with the experience of resilience as you describe it, as coming back to your board?
Yeah. So staying on your board for me, it's difficult to be courageous the way we want to be. It's difficult to know our boundaries, to stand up for the things that we believe in if we don't also have resiliency. And so resiliency is not just about staying on your board and being calm and grounded, because we're human. You can't be perfectly grounded all the time. But it's about being.
Oh no, we have the fire truck. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm glad you're outside. It's cold here in Canada. It's in Ottawa today. Um, it's it's about being. Resiliency is also about being aware of how your body is reacting, what your body is doing. Um, it's about like taking um, responsibility, but also awareness of your body, because our bodies have been colonized in a lot of ways. It's like you're going to ignore your body so that capitalism and so advertisement will work, and you will want to buy this extra thing. Um, where in fact, if we're tuned into our bodies, we can um, we can actually determine which boundaries work for us. We can determine which actions work for us, and it's easy sometimes to see that within our bodies, and sometimes it's difficult. But if we were all to just do like a really simple exercise right now, Tanya, if you're
Mm-hmm.
up for this,
Yes,
it's like
absolutely.
if you scrunch down and make yourself really small, and then open up and maybe even put your arms out a little bit, and just notice the difference, how that feels in your body,
Yeah,
right? When you're compacted down and you're small, but you also feel like you don't have any power,
that is
and it's
true.
stuck, right? And then you open up and it's like, oh, I can do that thing that I want to do. Or I can just be, or I can rest and take that power. So even that's just playing around with your body and things like how does your posture matter, um, can really make a difference.
Absolutely. So, Nashifa, what would you invite our viewers to try.
Mhm.
As
Sure. So
like
go ahead.
their first, let's say let's assume that they're disconnected. Their body and
Okay.
mind are disconnected because they are engaged in this busy life you're talking about. They have my activist friends, for example. We have so many things going on, and we have, of course, all activism activities, but we also have kids, and we have work, and we have dinner, and we have, bills. So it's like we always live in our head, and it
Mhm.
can get frightening to connect with our body, because once you start feeling everything, right?
Yeah.
And I understand some of my clients have begun there, like, I want to do this, but I'm scared because I know that everything will come, all the, like, the pleasant and the unpleasant and the pretty and the ugly. So what would
Mhm.
you invite them to do? What would be a good exercise to start, like, dipping their toes in this connection, in this communication with who they
Yeah.
are?
I'm glad you asked this question, and the way you phrased it is actually um, is is right, is very pertinent. It's the idea of dipping your toes back into awareness. When you jump in, it becomes overwhelming and
Mhm.
anxiety inducing, and even like the concept of crying can be too much because you fear you're never going to stop crying, or
Yes.
writing in your journal becomes a thing because you feel like you're going to have so much to write, you're never going to be able to stop writing and stop processing, right? So those really small things that can help just over time to kind of bring us all back into our bodies and bring the awareness by dipping our toes. Like I mentioned, if you have a tennis ball or a massage ball, uh, you roll it onto your feet, or even in like along your body. I'm going to show you kind of like this. You can roll the ball along your body if that's comfortable and gently. Um, and that's a really easy one. That's especially if you can do it, start with under your feet, is generally not triggering for people. If
Mm.
they're not capable of doing it under their feet, you can do it under your hands, like on the tabletop. Um, and to do it not only when you're stressed, but also when you're just kind of okay. To get into the habit of doing it can make a big difference, and it's bringing back little bits of sensation back into our bodies and back into that mindfulness and awareness of this is our body and this is our container. Is
I,
bringing that bit of calm. Yeah.
I
Those
love
are
that.
you love it. I'm glad. And
I
the thing is,
love
like a
it.
tennis
Yeah.
ball or squishy ball, even like if you have a squishy ball, one of those stress balls to squeeze, that's that's not. It's usually accessible by most people. A squishy ball's fine, or like a river rock is okay, or a crystal, whatever you want to use. Like just the tactile sensation can help,
So
right?
the idea is to offer our bodies a source of feeling, so we
Mhm.
can, like, awaken our nerves, our, like, physically offer them information to process. So by our nerves processing this information, it's like our body starts to wake up, right?
That's exactly it. It's like our
And,
bodies start reconnecting to our brains that are always thinking and so busy.
mhm,
And
I
so
love
what's
it.
happening is it's like it's bringing back. So we call it the prefrontal cortex. This is part of your brain here that does all the rational thinking, but that also helps you make decisions. It's also the part of your brain that has compassion. Your prefrontal cortex is also the part of your brain that's able to provide compassion for yourself, so you don't feel as critical about yourself. So all those parts of our brain, um, when we're scared, are flipped off. We're living in like our lizard brain, or we're living in the mammalian brain. That's really about flight or fright or just survival. Uh,
Mhm.
so when we can engage it through other experiences, like rolling a little rock in our hands and feeling what that means to us, or rolling a ball under our foot, it's a really simple one. It helps uh, it requires fine motor control, which brings our prefrontal cortex online. So if you like playing an instrument or sewing or needle felting or crocheting or knitting, those are all fine motors hobbies that help
Mm-hmm.
bring our prefrontal cortex online. And then that engages our brain to be like, oh, I'm relaxed, I'm in control, and I can make the next decision that's going to be good for me, or I'm safe if the message that comes up too.
Yeah. Wow. And also, you know what I like about this, and when and you know you're an expert on this because whoops, I'm sorry, because you work from body trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, I mean, there are many studies. There's evidence that humans thrive with human touch. Like
Mm-hmm.
babies grow healthier, and like they grow better if they're held by people than if they're just left in boxes. And that goes with us through all our life. Human
Mm-hmm.
contact, human touch nourishes us. But when that touch has been traumatic, when our when we cannot when we're not ready to be touched yet by other people, this first approach of using the ball or the pebble or our own fingers, like this first approach works
Mm-hmm.
for now as the first approach. Am I saying something? Does it make sense, or is
Yeah,
it?
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Because what it is it's you're in control, right? You're controlling the pressure with the ball.
Mhm.
If you're doing it under your feet, you're the one. It's usually we don't have trauma associated with our feet. Usually, I say, so that you're the sensory perceptors under your feet. You're not hopefully being triggered, and that's exactly it. That you're reaffirming touch receptors in a way that hopefully isn't triggering for you. Um, and it can take time. Like it's not something that has to happen overnight, and there's no real rush, right? To move beyond just having just using the ball or beyond, the hobby of knitting. There's a
Mhm.
lot of touch receptors that's going on into doing handwork, into doing things that require fine motor control. Um,
Yes.
there's an activity that I do with clients once they're regulated, and it's like patting your body down with your own hands. You can kind of see what I'm doing here, but that can still be really triggering for folks in the beginning, especially if they've experienced trauma, especially they have also if they're also part of marginalized communities. That can bring up triggers of being pat down by the police. That's not a tool that's going to be helpful for most people until they're very well regulated.
Mhm.
So it's about, like you said, dipping your toes in the water of regulation and also of touch and honoring where you're at, is what I would say. And it doesn't have to be like super stuff. Like I like bouncing the tennis ball around in ways that can be challenging.
Mhm.
Like just dribbling the tennis ball with one hand can be difficult, and then dribbling with just the other hand, um, like not catching it, but like you're just constantly bouncing it, um, or learning then bouncing it and sitting down with one hand and then coming back up. Those kind of things are challenging, and they bring our prefrontal cortex online, and they can be fun because you'll be surprised when you're bouncing the tennis ball. Suddenly you're laughing every time it escapes, right? And you
Yeah.
get a
No.
room full of right,
And
like a
fun
room
is
full.
I'm sorry. I just like fun is basic self care, and
Yeah.
we tend to forget that. But fun is on the basic layer of self care. If you're not having fun, you're not taking good care of yourself. And rephrasing that, in order to take good care of yourself, you need to provide yourself with fun. You need to allow yourself to laugh, to play, to enjoy these little things. So I love that you included in your exercise of like I can see bouncing and just
It's
trying to
so much
manage
fun.
the ball.
Well, and that's the thing. It's also a really interesting thing is when we're having fun or playing. our brains then go, "Oh, I'm safe," because we don't normally have time to do like handwork or hobbies or to play around unless we're safe. If we're being chased by a tiger, we don't have time to bounce a ball. If
No.
we're being chased by a lion, like if we're afraid for our lives, we don't have time to sit there and knit. So our brains go, "Oh, I'm safe," and that sends signals to the rest of your body, "Oh, I'm safe," and your muscles relax and your breathing improves, all those things. So it's all connected, and it makes sense. Like you can't play is important to self care, but if you're constantly in survival mode, accessing play is really difficult. Uh,
Absolutely.
and so it just needs to start with small things like bouncing a ball. And if you have kids, they love this, like bouncing the ball and seeing who's, um, you know, bouncing the ball and see who's going to be able to handle it, hang on for longer, that kind of thing, or bouncing a basketball back and forth. And it's a good way to reconnect as well because it's just about prefrontal cortex, like your brain talking to my brain kind of thing. Um, and so we talk about self care and resiliency and how do you handle it when you have kids and all these other things. And like the best parenting advice I ever got, I think my kid was about 3.5, is include your child in the things that you like to do. So
I love that.
right, like if you like to um, if then that's not always possible, but if it's available to you, take advantage of it. I mean, like when your kid's 3 months old, that's a little bit hard. But as your kid grows older and can bounce the ball with you, and like you can just have fun doing that, or if keeps you regulated is exercising, then include them in that, or going on a bike ride, or going to a jam session, or really like get your kid involved. I've seen little kids um, at djembe drumming circles, and it's amazing. They just love it. And, uh, so that's how you can kind of bring it into your everyday life. Um, with at our house, we have kind of tools to regulate ourselves and maintain resilience. In our living room, we have a little mini trampoline and a rocker board, and it's like I can see if I'm starting to get angry or frustrated, I will jump on the trampoline and start doing that. Or if my child is starting to get a little frustrated or even a little hyper, it's kind of like, this is what's going on. Why don't you choose something that's going to help you manage those emotions? And she's gone to the point now that it's often not any of the things. Like I'll say, why don't you try the rocker board or the trampoline or balance? We have a wooden dowel. That's also great. Balance activities are great. She'll
But
just start to
even
choose. Go ahead, yeah.
yeah, like our viewers probably don't have a trampoline. I'm
Yeah, a mini
seeing your living
trampoline.
room and I was like, I want that living room. But okay, let's say like us, non-resilience
Yeah.
body-based coaches. What about
We
like,
don't have all these things.
can a walk? Would a walk do the trick? Like
Yeah,
just
a
so
walk
the
is
idea is
great.
to move. What would be like the
The idea is to
basic
move to
recipe or the basic
yeah.
tip?
There's no like one fits all formula, but there are things that do help people more frequently than others. A walk helps, but it's also like challenging yourself a little bit sometimes helps. So if you can do balancing on the curb or balancing on a rail that you might find, um, that can work. You could take a tennis ball with you and bounce it as you're walking, and see if you can time it with your steps as you're alternating, something like that. If walking does it for you, then don't mess with that. Like if going for a walk works, then that's fine. Um, what are you
Yeah, but
gonna do?
I hear
What?
you that sometimes people take a walk, but they can't shut off what's
Yeah,
going on in their brain. So
yeah.
it just like works you up more instead of
Mhm,
calming you down, right?
mhm.
So
So what you could do too is you can notice your surroundings. So you can go through the senses as you're going through the walk. So then ask yourself, what am I seeing?
mhm.
And take a few minutes to internally or you can verbalize it. And then what am I hearing? You know, what am I smelling? What am I tasting? What am I feeling? The tasting and the smelling can be a little bit harder, but then you can tune into, oh, I'm seeing the leaves flutter in the wind. Oh, I'm hearing the leaves. Oh, I can feel the wind on my skin. Those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that sensory aspect helps us grasp onto something that's going on within our bodies, but is not so overwhelming, and that helps us come back to ourselves. So that's another way of doing it. There's lots of little different things.
Thank you. Well, I would like to summarize for our viewers what we were talking about today because I feel it's so valuable. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. So we started by introducing courage as things we do or we don't do sometimes
Mm-hmm.
to face a fear, and its relationship with resilience, as Nashifa defines it, is the capability of coming back to our board, like coming back to our center after
Mm-hmm.
being dysregulated. And as a body based resilience coach, Nashifa explains how we can do things, we can try certain activities to connect our brain with our body and help ourselves with this regulation. You mentioned balls. You mentioned starting with by rolling a tennis ball with your feet, for example. You mentioned like squishing balls with your hands or rolling them through your arms. And I feel it's very important to say, to repeat something you said, that is, you need to be gentle with yourself and you need to know where you're at so you can start doing that connection. And you also suggested movement as well, not exactly movement, but balance as one of the activities that you can also use to regulate yourself. Like not necessarily taking a walk if it will work, if it will keep you in your head, but more like trying to balance on the curb or finding somewhere to direct your attention. You also mentioned hobbies like knitting as something that is helpful to reconnect your body and activate your cortex.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you would like to add or to,
Sure.
as a wrap up?
Yeah, I think adding an example can be really helpful for people to understand how this can be used in everyday life, in situations, how you can stay on your board. Um, because it starts with this concept of like, I'm dysregulated, I want to come back to myself, and then it gets even bigger. It's like my window of tolerance is what we call it gets bigger so that if there's things that are dysregulating, I can stay within that groundedness and that window of tolerance gets bigger and bigger. Then and then we're able to actually like stay on our board even as we're riding the waves. Like so you can imagine a surfer. Um, that's those stresses of life. But an example would be when I've had to maintain courage is is even in advocating in my workplace. Is like a contract that I'm doing. And being able to say, no, we're going to do these sessions on diversity. Um, I'm going to facilitate and do consultation sessions on accessibility for this new system that you want, or I'm going to do one on diversity, and it's going to be BIPOC folk and people of marginalized communities. And no, nobody else is going to be able to be in there except me and my co-facilitator. My co-facilitator needs to be somebody who's part of these groups. Um, and that can be difficult to say to the people who are handling your contract, the people
Mm-hmm.
that your bosses essentially. This is an example. This is one of the contracts that I'm working in terms of diversity um, and and consultation as an analyst. Sometimes I get to do this stuff, and so to say that even for me to say like it's uncomfortable and it's not correct for me to be the one who's going to then be the sole facilitator for an accessibility session because I don't have the same accessibility needs as our clients. um, that's a hard thing to say. And so for
Mhm.
me to be able to maintain that courage and to be able to say that to the people who are in charge and to the people whose buy-in I need in order to go forward with that and to have that strength and that courage is to be able to harness those things in my body. So for me, before um, talking to the manager of the project about this, what I had done was I had gone and like and gone and balanced on the curb. I had done a couple squats and I had rolled a ball under my foot, and it worked for me to get my prefrontal cortex online. Sometimes that's a lot. Sometimes it's like that's a lot of things all at once. But sometimes that's what you need, and it's kind of like an experimentation. And sometimes it's kind of like you get what you want, you need right away, like right away that you just need to go balance a little bit, um, or go swing on the swings or something. Um, and sometimes it takes a little bit of playing around. But I was actually successful in maintaining my own sense of calm and really grounding and centering myself. And then being able to talk to the project manager and say, this is why we need it to happen, because we wanted to create a safe space for folks of these marginalized communities to talk about their needs and to engender trust, to create trust. Um, and this is why it's important. Uh, and we had that buy-in, and it was, um, you know, we're going to keep working on that. And so that's a really, and it's not always easy to kind of get that buy-in when you're in advocacy situations. It can be really scary because you're putting yourself forward, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
but but you can handle it. And then afterwards, what's really important is we call it bookending. Is also afterwards is to redo some of is to do again some body-based stuff to get your body back in centering, to remind itself like I just faced something really scary, but I'm safe, right? So that
I
was
love
like,
that.
yeah, right. You have to after you face something that can be scary. I mean, we don't have tigers and lions chasing us, but we do have scary situations in our normal everyday lives. And so to come back after that and like to stomp my feet, or again to roll the ball, is really helpful. Uh, and that can be sometimes something that you do, like you have a tennis ball at your desk at work,
Hmm.
or you go to the washroom and you shake all your limbs, like you shake it off. I'm doing it right now, and so the camera's bouncing. But those kind of things, those kind of things help, and they're small things that can really help us recenter.
Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. This quote comes to my mind. You know, big things start with small steps. So
Yeah.
I want to remind our viewers that as coaches, we can help you to trace your roadmap. We can help you to channel your desire to be well, to create well-being, to recuperate, and we can also work in coordination with mental health professionals because it takes courage to ask for help, and you can totally do it. So just, coaches have a specific line of work, mental health professionals have another line of work. We can work together, and that would be the best way to ask for help if you need so. So just putting here on the table, courage also means to know when you need help and to be able to ask for it or to look for it, and just keep that in mind. We're here for you. I will post Nashifa's page in the description of this video so you can reach them. And you can also find them at Own Your Decisions, which is my Facebook group. We are there. We are having this conversation about courage and how does it look like for you in your life in a way that you can create a life that you own, that you really, really, really make the decisions that make sense for you so you can enjoy them fully. You can create a life of joy and inspiration, hope, and peace. you can just click on the cover image. There's a button that says visit group. You can do that and you'll find us there. Nashifa, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for agreeing to the invitation and for sharing all this wisdom for us.
Thank you very much for having me, Tanya. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, be well and
You
wishing
too.
you lots of love to everybody. Thank you.
Have a great day,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.